Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Today we have one more set of great revenge stories. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story. Overtime ban? All right, I guess I better lock up now. This is an old story from back when I used to work in the opticians department of a major supermarket chain. I was a part-timer working 9 hours per week, 3 to 9 p.m. on Saturdays and 1 to 4 p.m. on Sundays. Part of my job was to close down the department on both days because none of the managers liked being around at closing time. The department closed at 9 p.m. on Saturdays, but it was often about 9:20 that I actually left. Closing down a department takes time, mostly because you can't do it when customers are browsing. Unsurprisingly, I consistently worked more hours than I was supposed to. All store employees were on the clock, and for some reason, the store took readings down to the second. You were paid an hourly rate to within a few seconds of how long you were clocked in for. My manager, I'll call her Val, because that was her name, called a meeting at 3 p.m. on a Saturday, which coincidentally was the time I was scheduled to start work. Everyone in the department was either starting or finishing their shift within a couple of hours of then, so it was a logical time. But that was about the only logical thing about it. The thrust of the meeting was that some people, she said, looking directly at me down the length of her not inconsiderable nose, were claiming more than their allotted hours, and that this must stop. Henceforth, all overtime must be approved in writing. This was entirely her decision. Other departments didn't have this problem as long as you weren't taking the mick. Fast forward to about 8:45 p.m. Val and I were the only employees left in the department. She started to gather her things, as is her way, and I started the process of putting our more expensive frames into their night display cases where they could safely be locked away when the department was closed. Val: "What on earth are you doing? There shall be wings." Me: "I'm locking up. I have to make sure I don't go over my hours today." Val: "This department has to be open until 9 p.m. It's in the store handbook. You can't lock up right now. My boss will be furious." Me: "You know from experience that it takes a good 10 minutes, I lied, it's actually more like 20, to lock up. I'm not allowed to be on the premises after I clock out. I have to start locking up, otherwise I'll be disciplined." I reach for the tannoy and my voice saying, "Good evening. Would Mrs. Locke please come to the optical department?" "Mrs. Locke to the optical department? Thank you," resonated throughout the store. Code for security, bring the keys, we're locking up. Val goes white as a sheet. The first cracks in her caked-on makeup begin to show. I could see the look on her snooty face as a very large penny began to drop. She yelled, "Wait here," while leaving the department with a purposeful stride. By the time she'd returned, I'd explained to the security guard what's happening. He agreed to play along. We start slowly locking down the spectacle frames. Val, with sweat starting to show on her brow, wordlessly handed me a hastily scribbled note authorizing 30 minutes of overtime. I showed it to the security guard, who nodded. Val left without a word, looking really flustered. Just as a customer walked in, my friend from security unlocked the frames again, and I went to serve. The following day, Val's usual snooty demeanor had changed. She didn't look contrite, but there were definitely a few cracks in her expression. She took me to one side and, without preamble, handed me a new rota and launched into what was clearly a well-rehearsed speech. Val: "There shall be wings. I have approved your request to extend your hours to 10 hours a week. I now expect you to work from 3 p.m. till 9:30 p.m. on Saturdays and from 1 p.m. until 4:30 p.m. on Sundays. I trust that this will not be a problem." Me: "Oh, that's fine. Thank you, Val." Val: "And henceforth, if you should happen to work slightly over your hours, do not be overly concerned about it." And our next story. Walk a shift in my shoes, boss man. My first job when I was a teen was as a dishwasher in a coffee shop that was just open a month in my seaside town. The owners had just left other jobs with a bit of cash and set up the place thinking it'd be easy money ticking over in the background of their retirements. Problem, of course, was they didn't want to work in it, but also didn't want to hire an experienced manager to run it either. As you can assume, problems ensued from the get-go. My MC was late on in the summer. My job was to clear and clean all the tables, wash and dry all the dishes, and make sure the floor was spotless. The problem, of course, was that it takes at least 2 people to do it on a calm day, never mind busy weekends in the midst of a summer holiday. As the boss didn't work there, he assumed I could do it all by myself. Now, I didn't have any frame of reference for how hard a job actually should be, so for the entire summer, I'd been busting my butt doing all this and barely making it work. I'd adopted so many shortcuts that the dishwasher never actually got used, as the baristas were telling me to hand wash stuff as they needed to serve it. We barely had enough cups to have the place full of coffee guzzlers and have some dirty to wash in the kitchen. So that meant I was in the kitchen most of the time scrubbing and barely having enough time to run out and lift dirty trays. But I still managed to do both. Looking back now, I actually had to physically run around the cafe at times to make it all work. WTF. Of course, the boss would walk in randomly during the day, and I'd get a telling off for the floor being dirty or a tray on a table. Didn't matter if the tray'd been there for 10 seconds. It was my fault. Now, I dealt with this all so far, sucked it up, and just pushed on, thinking I must have just been slow. That was until the busiest day of the year, when we have a show in town. The place was full, and with the town so busy, people didn't even mind standing with no seats to have a drink. The boss gets called in as we're swamped and not coping. No cups, long queue of angry customers, people sitting at dirty tables. When he walks in, he immediately points at every table with an empty cup on it, then says there is no cutlery, only to further add that the floor is a disgrace. I brick it and run out to the floor and clean and ask him to cover the dishwashing for a minute. I'd been stuck hand-washing dishes just so that the baristas had something to put coffee in. He's appalled, but complies. It's only when I get back there, I see that he's obviously never worked back here before. He actually spent the entire time I'm on the floor just packing a handful of dishes onto a dishwasher tray. The problem being that it takes ages to pack and wash, and he hasn't cleared any space for my new dishes to be placed. I crap myself and ask him to help move stuff so I can set the new tray down. He flips it as if he's shocked I can't wash dishes in my own hands. Bear in mind I have a tray of maybe 8 cups, teapots, ice cream cones, etc. He gets a space and the baristas start asking for cups. I start hand washing one to hand over, and he scowls at me. Everything must go through the dishwasher. Then he walks off to mingle at front of the house again. All right, mate, if you want it that way, then have it that way. I start packing up the dishwasher and try and organize the stacks of trays. Not 2 minutes go by before 4 baristas are screaming for cups and teapots. I just have to tell them the boss's new rules. Boss now flies in, whips open the dishwasher before it's done, telling me to start hand washing again. I start hand washing, and he immediately follows with, "There are tables out there with dishes." I'd been pretty frightened of him up till now, but having seen him start to lose his cool a little, it dawned on me that I was being overworked, and this guy didn't even know it yet. So instead of making any point or argument, I realized the best way to let him know is by showing him. I leave to get a full tray from out front. It takes a while to stack a few tables' trays together, and while I was doing that, he was sweating in the back, following baristas' cleaning orders, hand-doing dishes as they were needed. Of course, when I get back, there's again nowhere to put the trays, and he's now scowling at everyone as if we had constructed the building ourselves. Again, when I say nowhere to put trays, I'm including the floor, where trays were already stacked. He then runs out when I get the trays unpacked into some stacks of dishes, and he's back to front of the house. I have to then start cutlery. Anyone that's worked in a restaurant or cafe knows the bane of cutlery. I'm nearly done scrubbing cutlery clean when boss reappears and without looking pours coffee and tea into my cleaned cutlery in the sink. At this point, I can see he's defeated. He knows how precious my time is suddenly, and he knows he just effed me over by doing that. His eyes are just wide with an aura of F. He walks back out, still holding the now empty mugs, and leaves me to start the cutlery anew. Maybe a minute goes by when he walks back in and just asks me to tell him how I do my job. Effing finally! I wash and talk, telling him all the little tricks and tips for making sure crap is still moving out the front. I can tell now from his face as I relay how this place actually works that he genuinely didn't know. I can see somewhere in his head he's just realized how he must have been treating me and the other younger staff all summer to this point. He's sort of looking a bit broken. 15 minutes into working at his own cafe, and he's broken. The rest of the shift, he had his wife come down, and the three of us worked the full shift to close. At the end of the day, he actually apologized for making me work like that, and he'd always have staff on to accommodate the busy shifts. I actually went to work for him every summer after that until I left for college. I actually really appreciated his reaction to that day and always did a little extra than I needed to, and in return, he always paid me a little better for the extra work. And our last story. Kick the main boss of the company out of your bar at a company drinks? Okay. It happened to my dad. He was one of the 3 partners at one of his former companies, about medium-sized. One day, he and his company went to a company drinks. I don't think it was exactly a company party, but it was more than an after-work drink at the pub. Anyway, the bar was serving aperitifs, and my dad asked for his without ice, as he hates ice tainting his drink. The landlord, who was behind the bar, refused and said the ice was mandatory. So he served my dad's with ice. Dad accepted, took the ice out, and laid it on the drain rack that goes under the beer draughts. The landlord ordered him to leave. My dad was half expecting it, but asked him to repeat himself. The landlord once again told him to leave. My dad said, "Okay," and started to leave. And his company all started to file out after him. The landlord protested, No, you don't all have to leave. Only he has to leave." One of the other staffers said something along the lines of, "Sorry, mate, he's the big boss. We all go where he goes." So they all left and went to another bar. They'd made a reservation at the bar they were leaving, but they hadn't put down any deposit for it and hadn't bought any drinks yet. The aperitifs had been complimentary, so the landlord didn't even get paid for those. Also, for clarity, landlord is what we call the guy who runs the establishment in the UK. Another word might be publican, although it wasn't a pub in this case, it was a bar. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.